ECPAT is grateful for the opportunity to be on this panel, and it's really an honor to be with such eminent people on the panel. For more than 20 years, ECPAT has been working on combating the sexual exploitation of children, commercial sexual exploitation of children. And later I will be talking about the successes we've had and the strategies that we employ and the lessons that we have learned. But at this moment, I just want to speak briefly about what we mean in terms of the commercial sexual exploitation of children. And so when we say this, what we're talking about is child sex tourism, pornography that involves children, prostitution in which children are used, child trafficking for the sex trade, and in some countries, and very much following on what Adian said, child marriage. And I'll just give you a bit of news, and it's not good news in terms of commercial sexual exploitation of children, what we see at this moment. In regards to child sex tourism, we believe that the numbers are going up, not down. The best estimate we have is that there are about 2 million cases a year of child sex tourism. Now, what's happened is that we have more tourists, and tourists coming from more destinations. We also have tourism and travel to be a lot less expensive than it was in the past. We also have a situation where you can now book online. And so travel, the booking of travel is now anonymous. And what's worse, you can book children online. So you no longer have to arrive in the country and find the children. You can actually book them in advance. We also see a situation where if we have a country that has very strict laws, good laws, no problem, the child sex tourists will simply move to another. And so the numbers in terms of child sex tourism are not good. I was very happy to hear the President today remind us about promises that were made in the World Congress on the sexual exploitation of children that was held here in 2008. And she made a very specific reference to pornography. And in this case, we are really at a state of crisis. Not so long ago, there were about 500,000 images of children being sexually abused online. Today, they will have arrests, and one person will have 5 million images. So 5 million testimonies of a child being sexually abused, and more cases of children being tortured. The bad news is also that what we see is that the number of children who are very young has gone up. There is a trend in 2011, the number of children online, pornographic images, that 71% were under age 10. Last year, 76% were under age 10. And the other very disturbing trend that we're beginning to see is that more and more the images that we see online are of infants, some as young as 3 days old. So this is what we're beginning to see. We also are witnessing a situation where live streaming of child images or child shows, child sex shows is growing. This has become a very lucrative business for some. And the difficulty is that when the show is done, there's no evidence. And so these are very difficult cases to trace. So that is the situation that we see at this moment in terms of the commercial sexual exploitation of children. I thought what I would do would be to put out 10 challenges that we see in terms of ending the commercial sexual exploitation of children. Maybe they'll change the slide. And so the first relates to data. We simply don't have good data. We're always dealing with estimates. It's so difficult to get this data. And the data collections that we do, systems are very difficult, are very poorly resourced. We also need data about how much this business costs. Because if we're going to convince those in positions of power that they need to invest in this, we need to tell a better story. Recently, the Global Health Coalition against child abuse and exploitation came out with a figure, and just to give you an idea of what we're looking at, they said that the estimated health cost per year, direct health cost globally of child maltreatment or exploitation is $124 billion a year. And if you look at indirect costs, it balloons to a figure of about $500 billion a year. So we need more of these kind of figures so that we can tell our story to those who do think money. The second is that there is a poor political commitment at a global level, and you're saying, well, we're all here, we are committed. But let's remember that the Millennium Development Goals, which have very much driven where the money has gone over the last 10, 15 years, nothing in those goals talked about child protection. Nothing. And so for all of you in the audience who've worked at child protection over the past 10 years, you know that this has not really been a priority because it's been very difficult for you to fund your programs. Third challenge is that there remains a tolerance for the commercial sexual exploitation of children. Fourth, legislation is often not harmonized with international standards. So we may have countries where they have signed up to good international conventions, treaties, but their laws are not harmonized with those. Scale, and I've already responded to this. In some areas we have growth where we were hoping to have a decrease. And that scale is so large, particularly in the area of child abuse online, that we now have law enforcement agencies, some of the most important law enforcement agencies in the world, saying, we simply can't cope. We can't cope with the numbers. And so we need to find new solutions. We need to respond to demand rather than just try to prosecute our way out of this problem. And even if we prosecuted them, where are you going to put 2 million child sex tourists? In a jail? We'd have to build many new jails. There's also an issue that there is not enough specialized and integrated support for children who are victims of commercial sexual exploitation. And we're beginning to have some good research that tells us that these kids, it's not just enough to rescue these kids, but we then need to invest heavily in their rehabilitation. The World Health Organization's mental health study found that sexual assault victims have doubled the risk of experiencing anxiety, mood, behavioral, and substance abuse disorders. And this effect appears in all classes and in all high-income countries, middle-income, low-income countries. Another study that was done by the Mayo Clinic found that children who were victims of sexual abuse and exploitation have a history, or they're prone to suicide attempts, post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety disorders, depression, and eating and sleep disorders. And there is now good evidence that sexual victimization of children changes the child's brain, and it creates risks for that child that continue into adulthood. So it's not enough to just rescue the child. We're going to have to come up with rehab systems, and these are very expensive. We also know that it's very difficult to finance and sustain child participation. And what does child participation mean? And our experiences have been that we all want it, but we don't want to pay the price. And also, when we're looking at commercial sexual exploitation of children, we must remember that we're dealing with that which is clandestine, and we are dealing with criminals. And these criminals have lots of money and lots of expertise, far more resources than we have available to fight them. And finally, of course, and I've already mentioned, we do have a problem with resource. So I'd like to end where Aiden and others have talked about what's happening in terms of post-2015. And I think Martha and others have done us a grand favor by getting violence. I shouldn't say you got it, but I know how strong you have fought, and others have fought, Susan as well. And so at least in the high-level panel report that talks about the world we want post-2015, we do see some reference to violence. We now must really work hard to make sure that that gets in, that there are good indicators related to this kind of violence and exploitation of children, or otherwise I think we're going to spend the next 15 years, again, in the same situation as we were before, trying to fight a good fight, but really not having the resources we need to do it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dorothy.